This is The Modern Republic, a dialogue about the challenges facing our society today: education, culture, and politics. Plato began the conversation about justice, the great city, and the education of its citizens. This show continues that same conversation through a modern lens. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and join me on YouTube. For more from The Modern Republic, check out the Substack linked in the description. Thank you for being a part of the conversation. Now, on to the show. Today's guest is Dr. Gregory Sadler, founder of Reason.io. Dr. Sadler is a philosopher, writer, and speaker whose work spans a range of media, including Substack, YouTube, and his own online instruction. He is also the creator of Study with Sadler Academy, where he offers in-depth philosophy courses. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Gregory Sadler. What does your day-to-day look like?
It varies considerably depending on the day. So today, I taught an online class for about 2 hours, and then worked on video editing and wrote a piece for an online magazine that I write for sometimes called The Stoic. Then getting another class ready to roll out. So I have to build out all that stuff in Teachable, and, answering emails and all that kind of stuff. And actually helping a colleague here deal with a cat situation, connecting her with the right people. So, yeah.
You're not at a university, though, correct?
Well, I'm an adjunct at Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design, and I occasionally will teach for Marquette University, but that's less and less. They're having enrollment issues, so
Sure.
yeah.
Okay. This is actually kind of a surreal conversation for me, because I wouldn't say I know a lot about philosophy, but all that I do know is from the dozens of videos of yours that I've watched. This is actually really cool for me.
Well, that's good in a way, but you really want to be not just reading the primary text, but I shouldn't be the only go-to guy, because what if I'm wrong about this stuff, right?
Sure. I don't think you're wrong, though. Well,
you
maybe
know,
you're just right in a different way, right? Yeah, but it's I don't know. I find it fascinating. Now, of course, you've been doing this for quite some time, but you know so much about so much.
Yeah, I think the time thing is a factor, though. So I first started studying in a formal way in 1990, when I was a college student. And now, granted, my professors weren't very good, but you read a lot on your own. And then, so, we're talking 36 years at this point, and it's not like, I don't know, going to the gym or taking up an instrument where I did it for a while and then I quit for a while, then did it. I've been doing it continuously, right? And I guess some people, they find their groove and they just stick with that, and then, they don't have to learn anything new. But I'm always finding authors that I want to reread or teach again. And then new people I want to check out. So, after a while, you forget a lot of it, but some of it should stick, right? So that's how I wound up with that kind of range. Plus, teaching undergraduates and survey classes, a lot of people try to avoid doing that. And I think it's really great for you because you have to teach a wide range of stuff. So you got to get good at a number of things. It's sort of like playing in a band that does a lot of weddings and playing in bars, after you get past the jerks who are yelling, play Freebird and stuff like that, you got to know like 200, 300 songs that might come up. So, yeah.
Absolutely. So 36 years you've been studying. How long have you been teaching?
I think if I remember right, it should be like I'm starting my 27th year.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So have you been teaching philosophy or something adjacent to philosophy the whole time?
Well, philosophy the entire time. I've also taught classes in religious studies, humanities, literature, writing, occasionally as
Sure.
well.
Okay.
So, but mostly philosophy. Yeah.
Mostly philosophy. So then in those 27 years, have you found a good definition for the term philosophy?
No, I found too many definitions, and not a single one of them has any sort of like consensus in from the people in the field, and it's always been that way. It's always been a contested term. Um, I've come to a point where instead of having a definition, I'll say there's really like four main things you can talk about philosophy as a literature. Like you see all those books behind me. Okay, so that a lot of that's philosophy, and that's nice. You can go into a section of the bookstore or the library and you can say,
Right.
shoot me
Yeah.
towards philosophy, but some of it won't be in there, right? So you got a literature. You can think of philosophy also as like an activity, like we try to use our minds without appealing to, say, religious dogma or previous political commitments to think things through and discourse. But there's a lot of different ways of doing that activity. And then there's a discipline, like you can go to a university and find a philosophy department, but you might also find a lot of people doing philosophy outside that in a literature department or sociology department or communications or things like that. And then you can also think of it for some people as like a vocation. And it's become one for me, although I didn't plan to do this sort of thing. I just kind of stumbled into it um, a bit randomly, but it becomes something that kind of informs your life. And I'd say there's plenty of people outside of academia who are doing philosophy in that way. And so, that if you frame it like that, it kind of takes the pressure off of having to have a definition because you can kind of point people at different things.
Sure. Okay. So then since it is so broad, because I hear people say like, maybe not broad is the right term, but it's
No,
like we have
that
like
is the right term.
we have personal philosophy, but then if I say philosophy to my friend, he immediately thinks of Plato or Aristotle, or
Okay.
I say it to somebody else, I think of somebody else. So then what is the thing that connects them all together?
Oh, um, there's no one single thing. It's more like threads that are kind of braided together. So, if you talk about a personal philosophy, one thing that you mean is like a general approach to things. Like you won't say, here's my personal philosophy about Valentine's Day candy, right? You don't have a philosophy about that. You might have a
Right. Yeah.
philosophy about eating and be like, I shouldn't eat whatever crap I run across and I should take care of my body, right? Um, I don't know if you have to call that a philosophy because that's more like, you know, diet but it could be connected with it. And you could hear people say stuff like, well, my philosophy is live and let live, or
Right.
let
Yeah.
people have fun, or if you screw with me, I'm going to screw with you 7 times harder back. So those are kind of general principles that people follow. And it's not that I mean, some academic philosophers, when they hear people say stuff like that, they get really mad. They're like, that's not philosophy. Don't you profane the word by putting it in your
Exactly. Yeah.
mouth, right? It really bothers them when a coach talks about his coaching philosophy, you know. But
Sure. Yeah.
it's not unconnected, right? And you could talk about philosophy I think for a lot of people it's supposed to be something practical. It's supposed to help you figure things out in life, how you should treat people, why you're so screwed up, and how to be a little less screwed up over time. So these can easily interconnect with each other. You think about like popular philosophies as ways of life in the present. There's more people studying philosophy right now outside of academia than there is in academia, I would say. And a lot of them are interested in, I don't want to be such a big screw up. My relationships have kind of sucked. Let's see if we can fix this stuff, being thoughtful. So, Plato might play a role in that. You could certainly derive some useful things out of reading him. Aristotle will straighten you out on some things that are just as big of a problem today as they were in 4th century BC, So, yeah.
So then maybe, because this is how I understood philosophy up until I went to college and took a philosophy course. It was just thinking.
Oh,
It
okay.
was just
Yeah.
about thinking. It was just about thinking. So is that the common thing that connects these different types of philosophies when we say
Well,
personal versus academic or systemic?
yeah, I mean, there's thinking, right? And that's so broad. I mean, every discipline does thinking about stuff. Sometimes we, make fun of each other across disciplines, but that's not really nice. It's not like the sociology people don't think, or the business people don't think. They're all thinking. So it's got to be something more than just thinking. And maybe you'd say like trying to introduce some rigor to your thinking,
Okay.
and trying not to approach things with rigid preconceptions that maybe you get from your discipline. Like, if you're in a business department, the ultimate goal is to make money, right? You can say all sorts of cool things about, I want to be an innovator, I want to change the world, but it's really about making money. Because that's kind of the point of the business. If you're in the medical field, you're going to think an awful lot about how to attain the ends of medicine, alleviating suffering, forestalling death, those sorts of things. Philosophy, you could say, is a bit broader in its scope, but it kind of bleeds over into all these other disciplines, right?
Yeah. So then would you say the pursuit of wisdom then would be the thing that connects them all, just specific to the field that they're in?
Um, I mean, I kind of feel like I should say yes, but probably not, because
Okay.
I mean, wisdom is really, really high up there, and we don't always have to be seeking wisdom. I mean, you can always like deflate it a bit and say figuring out how not to like lose my temper with my kids and be a good dad is a certain kind of wisdom, but it's not quite the same thing as what people mean when they're putting wisdom up on a super high pedestal. I'd say there's all sorts of, what Aristotle called intellectual virtues. Wisdom is one of them. Being able to like figure out how to unscrew up your life and make good decisions, often called practical wisdom or prudence. That's another one. Knowing how to do things in terms of a craft, like medicine, or rhetoric. That's a different kind of thing to aim at. And they're all valuable. Um, so, but I'm not going to like knock anybody who wants to like start philosophy is the love of wisdom. Let's pursue it. I mean, it's a good thing to have wisdom. It's just, it seems like it's missing all the cool stuff at the lower
In between?
levels. Yeah. Yeah.
What? Yeah, because then what even is wisdom when they say wisdom? Just like ultimately knowing?
Well,
Or what do they mean by
I
wisdom?
mean, that's part of the trouble is they don't agree. The various philosophical schools and movements about what wisdom actually is. And in a certain way, you kind of have to already have some wisdom to be able to adequately explain it to somebody else, right? So I think of it more as like you're lucky if you wind up with it, but let's shoot for like intermediate goals,
Sure,
you know?
sure. I feel like recently, now maybe you would know better than me, in the past maybe 4 or 5 years, philosophy, especially online, maybe social media philosophy,
Yeah.
has gotten pretty big. Why do you think that is? What is it that's so like
Well,
capturing about philosophy in that way?
I mean, I'd say that's been going on for about 15 years in social media.
Okay.
I remember getting on Facebook in 2009, and there were already like philosophy communities there. And I think I got on LinkedIn about the same time. Now, they're not the same communities. The LinkedIn stuff is a lot more like, posturing about your jobs and things like that.
Sure, sure, sure. Absolutely.
And there were people on Twitter, and what else did we have back then? We actually had a social media community that was for academics called academia.edu before the people who ran it decided to like, turn it into a money-making machine. It was actually
Really?
kind of
Huh.
cool. Yeah. Um, so, but it's been so long, I'd kind of forgotten about that. Um, so, it's been around for a while, and, the popularization of philosophy through the internet, even before social media was taking off, right? So we can talk about like Stoic communities and Epicureans and skeptics of different sorts. There's even like a Platonic community sort of online that's been around for a while. And part of it is what the internet makes possible for us, right? All of us schmucks who aren't at some big research university can connect up with other people, and we can get access to texts for free rather than always having to go to the library. And we can see people will post what they're doing. We can see what they're doing. There's online events that we can participate in and make connections that way. So now you also get a lot of schlock, right? But we were getting that beforehand anyway. It's not like everybody who was tapped to do the great courses when it was VHS cassettes was actually doing a good job with it. They were just like prestigious people, and sometimes they're great and sometimes they sucked. But you'd have to actually like physically get a copy of that. Whereas now you just hop online, even or just on your phone, and you can watch. I mean, you've got more content available to you than you could ever watch in a lifetime, and so that's really cool. And I like the fact that it makes it possible for ordinary people um, to participate. And even to create their own content if they want to. I mean, anybody can upload stuff.
You don't think that it perhaps waters down the product? Because I would say I'm kind of like a skeptical person in
Yeah.
general, so I have to really maybe dig deep. But you don't think that maybe there's I don't know, like a diluted version? They're giving us a diluted version of the philosophy.
Well, I'll say that plenty of people are, right? But that's not a new phenomenon. That's been
Okay.
happening all the time. I mean, there was always like crappy. This is why we get fake quotes, right? That
Yep.
come from
Yep.
books written in the 1800s where somebody's like, here's the 10 lessons from Plato to, I don't know, Nietzsche or something like that. There are crappy books out there that people were doing a bad job. um, William Durant's The Story of Philosophy. Man, you read that, and then you read the actual people he's talking about, and you're like, I don't know what the hell books he was reading, but he did get Schopenhauer right or Santayana. So there've always been people watering the stuff down. You can even find complaints about fake philosophers in Plato's Republic. So I don't think that's a new problem. Um, and you could say, well, maybe there's a greater proportion of non-rigorous stuff on the internet. I don't know. I can't really say for certain, but I'm fortunate that I'm old enough to remember the pre-internet days when there was a lot of schlocky crap too. But the advantage of the internet is that if you're like paying attention, you can find the good stuff, right? I mean, there's some rules of thumb. If somebody is telling you smash that like button, they're probably full of crap, right?
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
and if somebody's spending more time on making their videos and thumbnails look really good than they are on actually researching stuff, or it's all like kind of, I don't know, clickbait stuff, like, you know, 10 things Nietzsche teaches you. The sixth will blow your mind kind of stuff, right? And that's probably watered down stuff, right? But there's so much awesome content out there in video form, podcasts, you know, blogs, online journals, um, discussion groups. People, I don't do it myself, but I guess there's some good Discord discussion groups that people do. I don't like Discord. You know,
That was a that's a big thing on Substack now. People will start like reading groups. Uh,
right,
that's
right.
a big thing. I've thought this question for a long time actually, and I don't know if I have an answer. You probably do. We've been talking about some of these philosophers for 2,500 years, right? Were they really that smart? Like, are they just as smart as the smartest person now?
Well, we don't have any way of, quantifying smartness. Um,
Sure,
and I mean, there's plenty of people throughout history who are clever but stupid. Um, I mean, popular scientists who write books about why philosophy, um, should end or something like that almost always turn out to be full of crap and haven't actually researched anything
sure,
outside their field. But, they strike people as being very smart. And then, we've got the people who are quite glib about things who people think are smart, but actually sound quite stupid when we start unpacking it. So I don't know. I mean, I will say this. There are some people who are like, oh, we're really degenerate in the present and we're not very smart. Look at how great it was in ancient times or medieval times. They pick some era, right? And there's a kind of survivorship bias. We look at the better stuff that survived, and we
sure.
don't look too much at all the schlock that was clogging up the culture back then as well. For every Aristotle, there were probably 30, you know, third rate philosophers who were trying to hustle and get some students that, were going to Aristotle's Lyceum instead. And we don't know about these people much because, nobody kept reproducing their books. So we look around the present, we're like, oh man, there aren't really that many great people. Well, there are actually a lot of. I mean, it's a like golden age for people who are really really smart, looking back and reincorporating ancient, medieval, modern philosophy, doing new things of their own. But we often just don't. We don't know what's out there. I mean, people will ask me in AMAs all the time. I'll get, hey, have you read this person? And I'll be like, man, I've never even heard of them, which isn't anything to say against them. There's like, 10,000 people publishing, interesting books every year. There's no way to keep on top of it. But no, I think, it's not as if people have become radically more intelligent, but they're not becoming stupider either. I mean, a lot of people, this is where it's good to have some historical perspective. Every single generation, and we could go all the way back into ancient times, has the generations before them saying, look at how stupid and lazy these kids are, right? And the current crop of Gen Zs, when they're in their 50s, they're going to be complaining about the next generation of kids as well.
So you wouldn't agree with the statement like a medieval peasant is smarter than most college graduates now. Have you
No,
seen that online?
I've seen variants of that sort of thing, but it strikes me that the people who say that sort of thing usually don't know much about the life of a medieval peasant or their mindset, right? Um, I mean, what's the average college undergraduate like? It depends on what college you're looking at. Um, so I don't know. A lot of this is sort of generalizing from too little experience.
So then let's say somebody uh, does want to get into philosophy,
Mm,
broadly speaking, right? Of
yeah.
course, we could point them in some way. I know there's a ton online about Stoicism now, which I'm doing a little bit for a college course that I'm taking. What is the, if we can say this, what is the benefit? What is it that they're going to get out of studying something like philosophy as it's commonly understood?
Um, a lot of it won't be very direct, right? It's not like you're gonna read something and then you're gonna be like, now I can fix my sink. Um, or I can change my oil in my car, which is tough to do now because they put the nuts on so tight you almost need like a special wrench to get them off. So you're better off just taking it to the oil change place. So there's a couple things. I mean, one thing that probably is not going to appeal to everybody, but you know, most intelligent people who are literate will find some philosophy stuff interesting and enjoyable to read. right? And it's going to vary from person to person. Like somebody might be like, man, I love Plato's dialogues. And somebody else will be, this is dog crap. I don't make me read this stuff, right? But maybe they'll find somebody else who they enjoy. So there's that. And then you could say, they used to have this wonderful commercial for one of our local colleges, and it was a women's college called Alverno, and they'd show this woman in the gym and she's pumping iron and stuff like that. And then they'd slam down this stack of books and they'd be like, we're going to do this for your mind. Right. And I was like, oh, that's a good hook, um, and, so if you study philosophy, it's not going to happen like in a one-to-one way. Like you don't read Aristotle's Ethics and it's going to make you smarter by 5 units in this way, right? Because life is not a video game where you level up or anything like that with XP, but it'll work on you, and you'll find yourself making new connections and seeing the world in a different way and being better at problem solving. I mean, philosophy majors quite famously score really high on the law school admission test, better than the people who are pre-law or poli-sci. Why? Because, they're constantly reading arguments and thinking about, logical chains of connection and how to make a case. So there's that part as well. And then, depending on the kind of philosophy you're reading, you'll probably find some things that are more directly applicable and practical. You mentioned Stoicism. So I'll just give you one example. If you struggle with anxiety about various things that probably shouldn't make you so anxious, reading Seneca and Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius and Musonius Rufus can probably help you with some of that, if you want to figure out why you're so angry all the time and losing your temper and ruining relationships, well, you can read Seneca's On Anger, and you can read what Aristotle, the first person to scientifically examine anger, has to say. And you can read what Plutarch talks about, a very underrated Middle Platonist thinker. You can read Augustine. There's all these cool people. And some of them will actually give you some really helpful advice that's better than what most psychotherapists bring to the table these days. But you actually have to like dig into the text to find that sort of thing. So, maybe those are through like 3 different areas. You could actually enjoy it. It'll somehow like work your mind out and make you smarter, keep you from becoming more dumb, over time, right? I mean, some people
Sure.
do like crossword puzzles to keep their
Right.
minds
Yeah.
active. You could read Plato instead, right?
That
And
would work.
then, there's practically applicable stuff as well.
Okay. I kind of want to talk about your second point, making the mind stronger, perhaps
Yeah.
making us less dumb. Obviously, I come from the perspective of a school teacher, so I teach middle schoolers.
Man, you are
Which I
doing
mean,
God's work there,
or the
That's
devil's. I don't know.
that's the proverbial trenches.
Yeah.
I've talked with people in the past because I've teaching college kids. Okay, they're a little squirrely sometimes, right? But there's no way I could teach high schoolers or middle schoolers. I would be losing my temper all the time. I'd get so upset.
I think
So,
you sell yourself short. I think you could absolutely do it. We need somebody like you in the classroom.
well, I don't envision it. So,
No, and nobody would blame you either. But
yeah.
you know, I've been teaching now. This is my 3rd year. I see a lot of not even cracks, just like humongous gaps in the way that kids are taught what they're learning. So of course, thinking back on classic tradition, I'm interested in classical education, pursuing that more going forward. Philosophy is a big part of that.
Yeah.
How, in your opinion, if you have one on the subject, how would you go about sort of incrementally implementing
Oh,
philosophy or philosophic principles into just a public school, for example? So maybe starting in high school, right? Because maybe middle schoolers probably still aren't there quite yet, but you get into the 9th, 10th, 11th grade. Maybe we start introducing some of these texts or some of these ideas. What would
I
you
mean,
think?
I think you could start introducing ideas and practices all the way back in middle school with, short reading selections, like no longer than a page. Um, and it could be quite helpful for them. Um, And I would say like maybe the two easiest, lowest hanging fruit kind of things would be ethics and understanding the emotions, because I mean, I think back to like, middle school and what a mess my psyche was, right? And I got no useful advice from anybody about anything when it came to that. I mean, my dad died when I was 11, and I remember um, going, into seventh grade, and the first day of class, they go around the class and they're like, "So let's everybody talk about what happened in your summer vacation. What did anything interesting happen?" I'm like, what the hell am I supposed to say? Right. And
Right.
I
Yeah.
eventually it came to me. It was in alphabetical order. So I had a little while to think about it because S. And I was like, well, my dad died and we had the funeral and we buried him and everyone got real quiet. And then the teacher was like, okay, let's do the next person.
Right.
So,
Yes.
I mean, a lot of times we skirt away from these things, and kids are really interested in right and wrong and good and bad, and how to figure out the better and the worse and stuff like that. We could be, we don't have to be like saying here is the definitive way to do it. That's where it's nice to have like comparison. We could be like, so here's how somebody that we call a utilitarian would look at things. Let's think about it in terms of dividing up a pizza. You know, you come up with relatable examples, and it's going to get messy. The kids are going to like, you're always going to have that smart kid in the back who's going to try to like screw you over and
Sure.
raise
Sure.
objections, and you can use
Yeah.
those to further things. And then in high school, I mean, it would be great if we actually, like other countries, introduced philosophy. Like in France and Portugal, a lot of other places, you do 2 years of philosophy, whether you like it or not.
Sure. Yeah.
Here, if you get it, it's probably going to be an elective. If you're at a religious school, it'll typically be like a religion elective. That's how I got uh, an intro to philosophy class,
Sure.
which sucked, by the way. It was awful, because
Sorry to hear that.
the instructor was boring as hell, and I did have a better class that I got, but it was actually taught by a guy who wasn't supposed to be teaching philosophy, but he changed the class to do that.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah. Or if you're in a public school, typically it's going to be like a social science or an English elective, right? So that's you can propose like a whole class, but I think, and actually there's a whole organization out there called Plato that focuses on philosophy for children, and I think they're doing some really great work. But what we need are um, sort of instructional materials for high school and middle school teachers to not just teach like whole classes on philosophy, but to smuggle in units on philosophy, like bits and pieces, right? And make it easy for them. You guys need lesson plans, or at least the bits and pieces that go into a lesson plan. You can write your own lesson plans. You need principal handouts. You know what else you guys need? Word searches
Sure.
and crossword puzzles and the kind of stuff you can give the kids that kind of it's low grade stuff, but it reinforces it. And it doesn't look like we have a lot of that out there, as far as I know. I don't know if have you looked for any of that kind of stuff?
I mean, I have a coworker has a degree in philosophy, so he's been
Producing
great with
things?
that. Yes.
Well, that's
Well, I mean,
awesome.
he's been producing stuff for the both of us to use in our classes, but maybe not for like wide consumption. But because I'm an English teacher, he's also an English teacher, so we
Yeah.
try to work it in as a discussion
Yeah.
a couple times a week, which is good with eighth graders. Just the other week we were talking about like what is good, what is bad. We talked about it for 45 minutes in all my classes, which is I thought it was great. But of
I
course,
think so too. Yeah.
that's not really a big push like the ethics or morals like you talked about in most.
Well, and how is it going to result in testable outcomes, right?
Well, it's not. Yeah, it's not.
Actually, if you don't mind a little bit of a digression, I'll tell you kind of a funny story
Sure.
about my
Yeah.
oldest kid. So, my kids were in Indiana, and Indiana loves standardized tests. Can't get enough of them. And anyway, she was wondering why in her English class they couldn't actually like read the kind of stuff that she was interested in, like Greek mythology. And the teacher was like, well, I mean, that's not what you're going to get tested on. And she was like, well, this is BS, smart kid, so just read it on her own. But she wanted to. What do you get by having it in a class? Other students you can talk with, a teacher who maybe knows something about it. There's a value add there. And what really ticked her off is she saw an advertisement on the TV for graders for these tests. And it said, you just need a BA. It doesn't have to be in any subject whatsoever. And you can be a grader for these tests. So then she put two and two together and she's like, so not only can I not study stuff that I know kids before were studying because of these stupid standardized test regimes, you're telling me anybody who's got a BA in any subject whatsoever, not even remotely connected to the thing that they're grading on, is going to be the graders, and they're going to get paid for this. This is where we're spending our money. Oh, she was mad, and I was like, well, you rightly so.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we're kind of stuck, unfortunately. It's like a vicious cycle. Philosophy isn't part of the curriculum, so it doesn't matter because it's not going to get assessed. So we don't put philosophy in the curriculum, and it just keeps reinforcing itself. Whereas in countries where it is important, they actually do test you on philosophy.
Yeah. And I think they've probably seen some dividends from that. Funny you talk about the grading of standardized tests. Here in Texas, the standardized test is now graded using artificial intelligence.
Really?
So one person, one human, I believe, grades the written responses, and then the other grader is AI. So,
ooh,
yeah,
that's asking for trouble.
I totally agree. I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
It's a whole. I don't have a lot of great things to say about it, so I'll wait and say them until after the school year's over, so I don't get in trouble.
That's a good idea. Yeah. Yeah, I've got to go, and I'm a volunteer at a cat shelter, and
wow.
Yeah, it's a fun thing that I do. It's also good for obviously for the cats who we take care of and kittens, and it's a nice community of people who are I mean that's kind of a cool thing too, and you can say that about philosophy. You meet other people who value something that you value. You can talk to them about that. You get something more of it. You mentioned like reading groups. When you go to a reading group, unless it's just an excuse for drinking the way that some adult reading groups are, um, presumably you've got some kindred spirits that you can relate to. That's kind of nice, isn't it?
Yeah. What is it about cats that you feel the need to, as opposed to a dog?
Well, I mean, I'm not a cat person excluding dogs because I've had lots of cats and dogs in my lifetime and I've had close relationships with them. But our my wife, when I married her, she had two cats and two dogs that she'd adopted. She'd never had any kids, and over time, they slowly died off as they get old. And I loved all of them, but the one who survived the longest, um, I became her person. And we had a really, really deep, close bond. She lived to 19 and a half years old, which was pretty remarkable because she almost died as a kitten. She and her sister survived an apartment fire in New York City.
Goodness.
And she lost half her tail. She was on antibiotics for like 2 years. My wife, really did a lot to take care of her. And she and I, we spent a lot of time together. We had all these like sort of like rituals. I would take her on walks around here in Milwaukee in a little pouch that she would stick her little head out of. And so anyway, she was a really integral part of my life in a way that kind of surpassed all the other animal companions I've had. And, my wife was like, man, when she goes, you are really going to be devastated. And I was like, well, yeah, I will be. But maybe what I'll do is I'll start like volunteering at the Humane Society or something like that. And I won't like bring any of them home. And as it turned out, my wife she went from being mildly allergic to severely allergic when the cats were
Oh
all
wow.
gone. And so, you know, I was kind of looking for a place, and almost home, which is kind of a unique shelter. There's no cages. It's all community rooms and stuff like that. And we have a very rigorous adoption process. You can't just like walk in and say, I want that cat. We do background checks. We meet with
Wow.
people. Yeah. But we also, we've adopted out, I think about 630 cats in 3 years at this point. So that's
Wow, that's a
pretty
lot.
good. So, I saw that they were there. I started visiting to kind of get a cat fix. And then I was like, I think I want to join these people. And now, as it turns out, I've become one of the people. Like we're going to get a new intake of cats coming from another shelter that has too many cats this weekend, and I'll be there to comfort them and, welcome them to the shelter. Cause it turns out I've got kind of a knack for making shy and traumatized cats feel okay. And
Okay.
so it's kind of a nice thing for me to do. It's not that I couldn't do it with dogs, I guess, but I've got my thing. It's sort of like when people say, "Well, why do you focus on these people in your videos and not these?" And I'm like, "Well, it's not that there's anything wrong with the ones that I don't do. It's just, you got 24 hours in a day. I'm gonna focus on this stuff instead." I mean, imagine if somebody was like, "Well, why are you teaching middle school instead of, I don't know, coaching hockey or something like that?" You're like, "Well, I
Because I don't
mean,
want to coach hockey.
exactly, yeah." And or I don't know, like teaching tap dancing. I mean, you might be like, well, first, I don't know how to tap dance. That's an
Exactly.
impediment right there. But even if I did, I can't do all of these things at the same time. So it's
Exactly.
not that I don't like dogs or anything, but I just, I spend more time with
Yeah,
cats.
sure. Absolutely. So is there a chance that we'll change it from the philosophy guy to the cat guy?
Well, I mean, in some areas, I am already the cat guy, right? When
Okay.
when people
Yeah.
come, when people come into the shelter, I'm not telling them, hey, I'm studying philosophy and doing videos on that sort of stuff.
Right, right.
They just see me as this guy with a beard and wearing a metal shirt and flannels usually, who's cuddling a cat and answering questions that they have. And then they're usually pretty surprised to find out, first of all, that I'm teaching anywhere, because I don't come across like a typical teacher. I don't speak in an academic parlance, unless I have to,
Sure.
code switching, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that I would teach philosophy, I don't think you'd like look at me and be like, yeah, that guy's probably doing philosophy.
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe. Maybe.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Sadler, thank you so much for giving me just 45 minutes. I really appreciate that. I don't want to hold you up any longer from caring for these kittens. They seem to need you. So
Well, I mean, they they need somebody, right?
sure, sure,
But I'm the one who's on the roster for today, so I got to show up. And
absolutely,
it's partly for me too. I
of course, yeah,
get to hang out
absolutely,
with them and stuff. But yeah, and again, the work that you're doing. So I'll actually tell you something, uh, kind of like university level academics, and then I think it applies completely to like middle school, high school teachers. So I mentioned, I think earlier, that you get kind of a breadth by teaching service classes. So intro, ethics, these low level classes where you're not teaching philosophy majors, let alone graduate students. You're teaching students who are there and they're like, why the hell do I have to take this class? Well, because it's part of the core, it's required. And so you got to get really good at reaching students where they are, and you got to have a broad breadth of knowledge, because you're the one in charge. I mean, you know what it's like, right?
yeah,
You're the one who
yeah,
has to keep order. You're the authority, and you probably never really thought of yourself that way before you have to step into a role like that. Um, well, you get good at it or your life sucks. If you're going to teach that kind of stuff for 40 years and you don't get good at like having productive interactions with students who are nursing, business, sociology, and you got to make the case for why they should care about Plato. So, if you do get good at it, it's kind of fun. You get a good feedback loop going on. They like it, you like it. And, the kind of stuff that you're doing with squirrely, what would you call it? I mean, the attention span of sixth and seventh grade, a moth. Yeah, there you go. Compared to like the average college student. Oh man, you are doing important work because sooner or later they're going to wind up in our classrooms, and if you didn't do a good job, then we get them and they're not good for anything. So
yeah. I try my hardest every single day.
That's
good. At least I tell myself I do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you don't have to always, you're going to have some days where, it just doesn't work out. But I think, hey, if you're doing 75%, you're already passing up most of, in any workplace, you're passing up most of your colleagues. And it probably shows with, how your students respond and what they get out of it, So.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I enjoyed the conversation.
Absolutely. I'll have to hit you up in a few months after I finish my Stoic course because I have a lot of questions.
Oh, yeah, I'd be happy to do so.
You've been posting a lot of stuff on Stoicism. Yeah, I'd love to chat with you some more.
That sounds great. Yeah, we'll definitely do that.